So what happens when a single court ruling in Washington, D.C. ends up sending an economic shockwave across the entire globe? Well, today we're diving into a huge clash centered on former President Trump, and it's one that puts the very balance of power to the test, with some pretty big consequences for international allies.
The political heat in D.C. is just scorching right now. I mean, it's gotten to the point where some top Democrats are actually boycotting the State of the Union address. But this is way more than just disagreeing on policy. As you can see from this quote, it's a flat-out rejection of the president's legitimacy. They're accusing him of breaking the law and ignoring what the courts say. This isn't just a protest, it's them refusing to be part of what they see as a total political charade.
But if you flip the coin, you get a completely different story. For Republicans, this isn't some crisis of political norms, it's a seriously powerful political strategy. They look at the president's actions, his address, and they see the core message they're going to run on in the midterms. And that right there, that sums up the divide perfectly. What one side sees as an assault on democracy, the other sees as a winning playbook with voters.
So what's the actual policy that's fueling all this political fire? Well, it all boils down to a sudden and very big tariff hike that directly links a Supreme Court decision to the global economy. Let's break down how we even got to this point.
The sequence of events here is pretty much a straight line of cause and effect. Okay, so the administration had a 10% global tariff in place. Then, just last week, the Supreme Court rules against them. The response, it was immediate and it was forceful. Within 24 hours, boom, the president jacks those tariffs up to 15%, which is the absolute max allowed under that specific law. It's a direct clapback, turning a legal loss into a massive economic escalation.
Now, this whole move isn't really just about trade numbers or economic charts. No, at its very heart, this is about the balance of power. It's forcing everyone in Washington to ask, what are the real limits of a president's authority? And it's all happening out in the open with incredibly high stakes.
And speaking of high stakes, the money involved is just staggering. We're talking $175 billion that these tariffs have already brought in. That huge sum is now right at the center of this political brawl over who gets it back, if anyone. A number that big really shows you the scale we're dealing with and why the fight is so intense.
This moment is a real political turning point. Ever since coming back for his non-consecutive second term, the president's power has pretty much gone unchecked in Washington. But this Supreme Court ruling and the pushback it's caused, this is the first major check on his executive authority. It really signals that we're entering a new, much more confrontational phase.
But don't think for a second that this check on power means a full stop. The analysis suggests the total opposite. See, by using the last option under that one specific law, the president is basically sending a message that he's got other tools in his legislative toolbox, and he's ready to use them. It's a strategic move that says, okay, you can block me here, but I've got other ways. And that, right there, sets the stage for a whole lot more legal fights down the road.
So this domestic power struggle, it's not just happening in a bubble. It is creating massive headaches for America's allies who are kind of caught in the crossfire. If we look at it from Australia's point of view, for instance, you can see they're facing a really tough strategic choice, and there are no easy answers.
And this really lays out their dilemma perfectly. I mean, on one hand, a country like Australia could jump into the legal fight and challenge the U.S., arguing they were basically bullied into trade deals. But that means poking the bear, right? And that risks a serious backlash. The other option? Stay on the sidelines. Let the bigger economic players like the European Union lead the charge. This would help protect other huge priorities like the AUKUS Security Pact. So the calculation really becomes, do we fight for our rights on this now, or do we protect our other strategic interests for the long haul?
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What kicked off as a domestic political and legal fight has now just spiraled outwards, creating this massive ripple effect that touches everything from the U.S. Constitution all the way to international trade and diplomatic strategy.
So to sum it all up, a Supreme Court ruling in the U.S. directly sparked a global tariff hike. The president isn't backing down. He's just finding new ways to push his agenda. This then forces allies into a really tough spot where they have to choose between a legal battle and protecting their other national interests. And when you look at the whole thing, it just goes to show how deeply connected law, politics, and the global economy truly are.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question to chew on. When a country's internal power struggles start spilling over its own borders, when a domestic legal fight turns into an international economic weapon, who is it that really ends up paying the price? Is it the companies, the consumers, or is it the allies who are just caught in the middle? That's the big question here.